Thank you, Shoshana, for getting us started. Welcome, everyone, to our second TA call of February. Today, we are going to be highlighting an issue that I think has affected almost every early childhood or K through 12 jurisdiction. And the issue is personnel shortages. It was certainly something that was with us pre-COVID, but as we emerge from COVID, it has become even more acute. So today we're going to introduce various resources and information that can support states in their efforts to try to eliminate educator shortages. Our goal is that every infant, toddler, child, and youth with a disability have access to outstanding, well-prepared, and well-supported educators and early interventionists who reflect the diversity of the students they serve. And I'm sure that is your goal as well. Leading us today is our OSEP staff member, Brian Grigg, whose lead area in our office is personnel shortages. So without any further ado, because we have a full agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. All right, welcome to this month's TA call on personnel shortages. We're excited to have you here with us to discuss the important topic for both Part C and Part B. As Greg mentioned, my name is Brian Grigg, and I am a state lead here at OSEP. Today, we're joined by Danielle Hayden, the Early Childhood Special Education Supervisor for Minnesota Part C. She will discuss state personnel on addressing early childhood personnel. We also have Maureen Tracey-Mooney, the Senior Advisor in the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development. Maureen will walk through the 5 key strategies for eliminating educator shortages. And last but not least, Dr. Lindsey Hayes, who is the co-director of CEEDAR. She will provide resources and state-specific examples for others to utilize. Knowing that this is such an important topic for both Part B and Part C, we are interested in knowing more about how states are using IDEA funds. The information here is specific to Part B, but similar discussions can take place with Part C as well. Given what you're experiencing in your state, is it enough? After taking a look at these numbers, it's worth considering. Coordination with IHEs is important because you want the pipeline to be training folks who will address your current needs. This is what we know currently. With the increase, is there more flexibility to focus these funds on personnel shortages?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. While my focus today comes from a place of early childhood special education programs, it's important, and you'll see it throughout my presentation today, to note that our workforce that supports young children and their families crosses a variety of sectors, and we think collectively in Minnesota about our workforce supporting our youngest children. Thank you. So just to set a little bit of context for Minnesota, because we are a little bit of a unicorn in the bunch, our Part C program is not only led through the Department of Education, but it's also a birth mandate. So all of our educators and personnel providing Part C early intervention services are licensed through our licensing board and are part of our local education agencies, school districts primarily, and cooperatives in some of our rural parts of our state. And so families are able to receive these services at no cost. Our providers are licensed early childhood special education teachers, as well as related service providers of speech, OT, PT, et cetera. And we really emphasize a primary service provider model and a routines-based intervention approach to supporting families in their homes and other natural settings, like childcare, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. Again, as we think about the workforce that supports young children and their families, it's important to consider all facets. For Minnesota, we have colleagues across care environments, Head Start, school-based preschool and family education programs, county social services, and clinical practitioners. And we see all of them as a valuable part of this system. Over the last several years, our ECSE team at the Department of Education, along with partners in this work, have begun to look more holistically at our licensing, credentialing, professional competencies and standards for more complementary facets of supports. So what are the things that we can capitalize on that we're all needing in our professional lanes? And where do we need to create some unique supports? This has led to us really looking at how we crosswalk the requirements associated with pre-service and in-service development and how we might leverage national and state organizations to become more coordinated in the support of the workforce with this holistic mindset. Essentially, in the time and financially strapped resource system, how do we pool our efforts rather than create redundancies? And how do we show each other support for our specialties and filling in the context of specific needs of the workforce? This is the work ahead. And in the meantime, Minnesota has capitalized on state and federal resources and funding efforts that show up in many ways. The following slides will demonstrate some of the support specifically designated to the workforce supporting care and education of young children and their families in Minnesota. First, I'll share a brief overview of just some of the programs from the Department of Education. We have a Grow Your Own program that's specific to K-12 as well as early childhood. We have a special education teacher pipeline and another effort called Come Teach in Minnesota, just to name a few. Our Grow Your Own is really focused on helping individuals earn in early childhood CDAs or their child development credential or an associate's degree. There's also opportunities to pursue licensure and bachelor's degree programs as well. There's also a Grow Your Own teacher diversity grant opportunity with Minnesota school districts and charter schools, also administered by the department. Our special ed teacher pipeline is a grant funded to support employees to become Tier 1 or Tier 3 and Tier 4 licensed special education teachers. In Minnesota, we have a tiered licensure program that has really afforded us some flexibilities in bringing providers into the classroom and then working with them to licensing and credentialing that's appropriate for the position they've been hired for. Come Teach in Minnesota is a funding opportunity to recruit teachers of color and Indigenous teachers from out of state by providing hiring and retention bonuses. And then additionally on this slide, I was able to provide a link that is like a full inventory of all the different funded programs related to the education workforce. Recently, I've been involved in work with our Department of Labor and Industry as they're looking at dual training pipelines and apprenticeship programs and have begun to incorporate the childcare world into some of this work. The dual training pipeline exists to support employers in creating and enhancing a competency-based earn and learn dual training approach to meet the workforce needs. And then also a registered apprenticeship program that really brings in on the job training and learning the technical skills and prepares the workers for their careers, both of which have had a lot of success in our childcare partner work. In addition, our Office of Higher Education also has grant programs available, one being Minnesota Future Together grants. And these are a tuition-free pathway specific to earning certificates or diplomas and degrees in some of the fields in which they have designated as high need areas, and education being one of them. The Minnesota Dream Act is for aspiring teachers of color. It's a scholarship program providing post-secondary financial assistance to eligible undergraduate and graduate students who are preparing to become teachers. And then North Star Promise is a program to pay for 100% of higher education tuition and fees. And students specifically receive this eligibility if their family has an earning less than $80,000 for their family's AGI. So lots of work there in terms of supporting a variety of programs for students in the education pathway. And then the last one is our childcare workforce. And I'll just kind of summarize these ones a little bit. The childcare workforce, as all of you are probably aware, has been a huge has taken a huge hit during COVID and beyond, and just a lot of needs in the field, particularly as it relates to supporting our youngest children with special needs. And so our childcare workforce in Minnesota has a number of different activities going on and grant programs that include scholarships toward credentialing, retention bonuses, support to complete pathways to CDAs, and grants to improve wage parity. Additionally, Empower to Educate looks at supporting job training, grants, and career pathways to high school students beginning at the age of 16. So really looking at when do we start bringing awareness and encouraging the field of early care and education to our high school students. And then finally, in an effort to help all of these young students find a way into these careers and into the resources available for them, our childcare partners have developed Wayfinder, which provides personalized support and encouragement for navigating the childcare licensing process and offers resources to help expand and sustain currently licensed childcare programs. Next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're using our federally mandated comprehensive system of personnel development in Minnesota to really look at how we use that framework and structure to support the coordination of all of these programs that I just highlighted across the services and supports to meet young children and their families. This is Minnesota's CSPD vision and mission. We have been successful in sustaining this work and growing our engagement across agencies and sectors and professional roles, in addition to a significant amount of parent involvement. We use this structure and these goals to keep moving work in building and supporting a strong workforce going forward. And some of the pieces of our CSPD work are really thinking about how we use the structures and frameworks and requirements as a bridge to all of these other workforce partners. Really looking at all of our shared needs in regards to retention and recruitment, sustainable programming and support, our personnel standards that I talked about earlier. What are the things that all of our workforce need to support high quality programming for all children? In Minnesota, we're standing up a new Department of Children, Youth, and Families that aims at coordinating and better aligning systems for Minnesota's children and youth and their families. As you'll see from the presentations to come regarding workforce attrition, we have a roadmap to put to use, and Minnesota's retention survey mirrors what is to be shared. Aligning to our SSIP, or a state systemic implementation plan, we're focused on building high quality evidence-based practices, professional development that supports the needs of most identified by practitioners as necessary to be prepared to do their work. And we all know that when you feel well prepared to do your work, you're more likely to stay in your job and your career. Additionally, continuing our close collaboration with institutes of higher education that are preparing our field through in-service programming and experiences that are well aligned to the ever-evolving needs of children and families while leaning on our partners in health and human services to round it all out. So I've just listed on this particular slide all of the programs and partners that we believe are critical in these early years that we're working really closely with in mitigating some of the things that we've been able to identify in our workforce as needs, and really helping bring family needs into those conversations. Thank you. I think my last slide is just a thank you and a way to reach out to me if you need to. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maureen Tracey-Mooney. I'm a senior advisor here in the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development at the U.S. Department of Education, and lead our department's efforts coordinating across agencies to eliminate educator shortages. I'm going to give us a high-level review of where we are right now in terms of job recovery and what the department is focused on, and encouraging states, school districts, institutions of higher education, all of our key partners in the field to really focus on as we collectively work to eliminate educator shortages. So as I think folks know, obviously the pandemic had a really historic negative impact on education staffing. We lost 9% of all local public education jobs in just 3 months in 2020. And we've made a ton of progress. So as of right now, when you look at total public education jobs, we're now down less than 1% in terms of where we were before the pandemic. Unfortunately, just as we saw kind of the loss of teacher jobs lag, the loss of other jobs in education, we're also seeing a lag in the recovery of teacher jobs. So as of last May, for example, we were still down 2.2% of all those jobs after having lost 7% of all of our teachers during the pandemic. We also know, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, that schools are just not seeing the same level of applications. So whereas before they might have interviewed 4 or 5 candidates for a teaching position, now they're just sort of, we've heard, taking somebody that they had rejected several years in a row, but are now accepting that person, or having somebody on emergency certification in a position. So just because a job is recovered doesn't necessarily mean that that's a highly qualified educator that's in that position. And we know, as always, that these types of issues disproportionately impact our students with disabilities, our English learners, our students in schools that have larger percentages of students of color, our schools serving high poverty communities. So it's a critical issue that the department is focused on. And as we do this work, we're really focused on 5 key strategies. First, improving compensation for our educators as well as their working conditions. We know that unless teachers are paid more competitively, we're not going to address this systemic problems and challenges facing the profession. As folks know, while the pandemic exacerbated our staffing shortages, they were well entrenched before the pandemic. We've seen teacher wages not keep pace nearly as much as other professions over the decades, with the gap between teachers and their similarly educated peers growing. So right now, teachers get paid about 74 cents on the dollar versus their college educated peers. So systemically, we have to address that issue. And we also have to address their working conditions. That means things like time for collaborative planning with their peers that we know are really important, both for the education, instructional practice of our teachers, and for their ability to sustain in the profession. We know those relationships are really important. 2, scaling high quality and affordable pathways into the profession, pathways with robust clinical experience, so folks are entering the profession ready to succeed, and pathways that are affordable. Right now, we are just excluding large portions of our population from becoming a teacher because it's just too expensive, and we have to fundamentally address that. In this space, the department has particularly focused on residency programs, grow your own programs, and registered apprenticeship programs for teachers. These are high quality pathways when aligned to what we know works in educator prep that provide opportunities for folks like a paraprofessional to be employed while they're taking coursework, while they're getting on-the-job training from a mentor teacher. We're really excited about the growth in there and excited about what we are seeing in some places requiring that everybody in apprenticeship program, for example, get certified in special education. 3, high quality new teacher induction and ongoing professional learning throughout our educators' careers. We know that our teachers can continue to grow and improve their practice and impact on students, but we needed that high quality job embedded coaching and support that has an impact. 4, teacher leadership and career advancement opportunities. Some teachers are very happy to stay in the classroom for their entire career. We know other folks don't want to do that or want to have opportunities to lead. We need more opportunities for teachers to continue to teach while taking on additional responsibilities that they're compensated for and have the time for and advance in their careers. And finally, educator diversity. And this is really twofold and woven throughout these efforts. First, we know that educators of color have incredible impacts on all students, and particular impacts on students of color. It makes a real difference. And secondly, we can't address our educator shortages while leaving huge chunks of our population behind. We have to be inclusive and make sure that we have pathways for everybody to enter the profession. And the affordability challenge is really important here too. We know that our college students of color are graduating with significantly more debt than our white college graduates, and that's another barrier for them to coming into the profession. Next slide. So now I'm going to walk you through a few of the resources on this webpage, which I hope you'll explore on your own time. It really pulls together lots of data visualizations on what's going on in all of the states, as well as information on resources at the department to support your work in eliminating educator shortages. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So that handy web address that was just shared goes to our Raise the Bar webpage for eliminating educator shortages. It includes 2 policy briefs. I'll show you one of them now that highlight the department's focus and data visualizations on increasing compensation, providing high quality and affordable preparation and teacher leadership, and a second policy brief on increasing educator diversity and addressing high need shortage areas. Both reports include data visualizations, including state-by-state breakdowns of data, as well as information on grants and resources that support this work. So just at a high level, the website sort of breaks down each of our strategies. I'll just note that here we have this really interesting map that displays where all of our states are when it comes to recovery of jobs lost during the pandemic. So for example, Indiana, just to explain what this means, Indiana, when you look at their total employment from October of 22 to September of 2023 and compare it to that same time period, October 2018 to September 19, they're down 4.3%. And so this is using that kind of 12-month moving average over that period. So you can see the level of variation from state to state, what states are now sort of recovered technically in terms of total local public education jobs and who has additional challenges to face. As I said before, teacher jobs in general are still struggling, but you can see how this kind of picture varies from state to state. As I said, compensation is really critical to addressing shortages. This map shows us the average salary, average top salary, and average starting salary for every state. So it's important to understand where your state is in this context. The stars indicate states that have taken action to increase teacher pay since 2022, including that year. And then this website or this visualization is showing us trends in enrollment in educator prep programs nationally and for each state. So you can select your state. And then finally, as I mentioned, we've been focused on expanding registered apprenticeship programs for teaching. This map shows you where all of our states are, and I'll chat, Shoshana will chat later a link to the Department of Labor's website where you can look up registered apprenticeship programs in your state. So if you're thinking about, this is something that I want to explore, starting with having conversations with program sponsors that are already in your state and understanding the lay of the land. Some programs are started at the state level, but sometimes an IHE or an LEA may have moved out on its own. The DLL website provides that kind of really important context. And then there's a list of grants and resources that are particularly helpful in this context. In the resources section, I'll point you to a few things that you can check out later. First is this joint letter from Secretary Cardona and then Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh, calling on states to establish registered apprenticeship programs in teaching and providing a little bit of that context, information on sustaining investments in teachers beyond the American Rescue Plan, a few other resources. And then finally, I just want to show you our map of shortage areas, which is in our policy brief. One moment. So this is a report on educator diversity and shortage areas. If you come down here, sorry, one moment. You'll see that not surprisingly to any of you, we have the most states reporting shortages in special education. Here are all the states that are reporting those shortages. And then you can scroll down and look by state as well for every shortage, all the shortage areas for each state. So those are just a couple of resources. We'll share in the chat the link to the Department of Labor apprenticeship resource I mentioned. Particularly of note, the Department of Labor actually just today announced I think the total is about 100 million, total of $200 million in funds to support apprenticeship programs, including K-12 teaching as a high priority, high demand occupation. Those include state apprenticeship expansion funds. So there's an opportunity there to understand what your state's workforce agency is planning for in those funds. Last year, we had 37 states include education apprenticeships as part of their plans for those dollars. So I highly recommend engaging with your state workforce agencies about their plans for those dollars, and the opportunity to focus on special education and teaching apprenticeships. There are also new America Builds apprenticeship grants that states, school districts, institutions of higher education can apply for through partnerships, and that includes a focus on K-12 teacher occupations as well. So we continue to really partner with the Department of Labor in those works. And if you ever have any questions about that work stream, please feel free to reach out through your contact, and we'll happy to get you the answers. Thank you so much.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsey Hayes, and I am a co-director of the CEEDAR Center. And on behalf of the CEEDAR Center's leadership team, we are very grateful for the opportunity to present to OSEP this afternoon to highlight the work of the CEEDAR Center related to addressing educator shortages. The first thing I would like to do is provide some context about the CEEDAR Center and our mission. We are an OSEP-funded National Technical Assistance Center whose mission is to build the capacity of state personnel preparation systems to prepare teachers and leaders to effectively serve students with disabilities. We are currently in our third round of funding, and we currently work in 21 states. In the history of our center over the last 11 years, we have worked in about 2/3 of the states in the country. In addition to a focus on high quality preparation of teachers and leaders, we also have a focus on making sure that there is state level policy that incentivizes high quality preparation of teachers and leaders. We also recognize that when we talk about personnel preparation, it's important to talk about the preparation of general education teachers and school building leaders, in addition to the preparation of special education teachers. So the mission of our center is to integrate general education, special education, and school leader preparation to ensure that our educator workforce is able to effectively serve students with disabilities. Our priorities, in addition to a focus on high quality instruction for teacher and leader candidates, include a focus on policy and sustaining and scaling efforts. But our priorities for this third round of funding also include a focus on using multiple sources of data to inform continuous improvement of personnel preparation systems and how they attract, prepare, and retain teachers and leaders. So in this focus on shortages, what we do through our center is build networks for educator preparation at the state level that involves state education agencies, educator preparation programs, mostly those based at IHEs or institutions of higher education, but also other types of preparation programs that exist in states and local districts as is applicable. And within these state level networks of state education agencies, educator preparation programs, and local education agencies, we work with our states to diagnose needs related to their educator workforce, take a look at their data that informs how shortages are existing in the state, and create a plan for how we're going to address attracting and preparing and retaining high quality teachers and leaders across all of the state and local and educator preparation program levels. To do this, we implement a multi-tiered system of technical assistance supports. Many OSEP centers operate on a similar model. So we provide universal technical assistance supports, which consist of high quality, evidence-based, publicly available resources and tools that we maintain via our website. We also provide targeted technical assistance supports, which are aimed at providing supports to groups of states that are demonstrating similar needs. And we also provide intensive technical assistance supports, which is really the core of our center, which is working with these state teams, these state preparation networks, to implement action plans that address high quality teacher and leader instruction, that address attracting, preparing, and retaining teachers and leaders, and address the policy aspects. So today what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we at the CEEDAR Center leverage our universal resources that we have available related to shortages, and take those resources and leverage them to provide high quality, targeted, and intensive supports to states to strengthen how they attract, prepare, and retain teachers. So to do that, I am going to highlight a specific strategy and a specific state in which we have used our CEEDAR Center universal resources related to shortages. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is a strategy highlight on apprenticeships, which I heard my colleagues mention as a way to expand how we are creating accessible pathways into the profession for educators. Because our focus at the CEEDAR Center is on personnel preparation, we are very focused on the idea of registered teacher apprenticeship programs from the perspective of educator preparation programs and how they develop partnerships with state and local entities. So we definitely situate our technical assistance to our partners around this idea that apprenticeships are one response to educator shortages that can help increase the educator preparation, enrollment, and degree completion, which is certainly something that is on the mind of our partners in educator preparation. It can also help tailor the preparation of teachers, the creation of registered teacher apprenticeship programs, and the partnerships that it fosters between ed prep and state and local entities really creates an opportunity to talk about the kinds of supports that are provided to teachers during the preparation process. What does their program coursework look like? What do their clinical experiences look like? What do their supported mentorship experiences look like? All of that creates an opportunity to come together and think differently about how we tailor the preparation of teachers to today's needs. And all of this, of course, is in the service of improved K-12 student outcomes. Because at the CEEDAR Center, we are focused on sustaining that network that has the state, local, and educator preparation perspectives. We have an opportunity to be very responsive to the needs within a state. We are able to look at where their shortages are and target the development of these teacher registered apprenticeship programs to really address the needs that we are seeing at the district and school level. So I'm now going to highlight a few of our universal resources, again, that are free, publicly available resources that we have used as a springboard for our supports to states. The first is a brief called Take a Seat at the Table, the role of educator preparation programs in teacher apprenticeship programs. This brief has some basic information about teacher registered apprenticeships and their potential to increase the pipeline of teachers. There is a focus on how we make these pathways accessible, affordable, and above all else, high quality and effective for educators, and gets into some of the considerations that educator preparation programs need to have as they embark on designing these programs. For instance, how classroom training, related instruction, and the hands-on experience components of apprenticeships come together. This is really a foundational document that has informed our technical assistance approach out to states. Another question that we are asked very frequently in the course of providing these technical assistance services is how to fund registered teacher apprenticeship programs. So to that end, we created a universal resource that is a funding guide titled Supporting a Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program with Federal and State Funds. We're uniquely positioned at the CEEDAR Center to be able to talk about this, bringing the federal perspective together with our knowledge of what's happening with states to talk about how we can leverage funding through blending and braiding to be able to support registered teacher apprenticeship programs. So support with aspects of program design, which obviously our center is very focused on, how we design high quality preparation programs, recruit for those programs, and ensure that they are affordable and accessible for all. We talk about how to fund the field support or on-the-job learning or clinical experiences that are part of registered teacher apprenticeship programs. how to provide wraparound services to the people who are going through apprenticeship programs, things like tutoring, career counseling, transportation, housing, childcare, food, all of those unique opportunities to provide additional supports that make teacher apprenticeship programs an attractive option for many people who want to enter the field of teaching. And finally, how we make this affordable for the people going through teacher apprenticeship programs. So sources of funding related to scholarships or total compensation, loan forgiveness, tuition reimbursement, certification fees, etc. Again, funding we recognize is a very important aspect. It is a very common question that we are asked in the course of providing technical assistance around teacher apprenticeships. And this universal resource is intended to provide a springboard for how we provide intensive supports to states. Another universal resource that we use quite frequently through the CEEDAR Center is the Department of Labor's apprenticeships website. There is obviously a very close interplay between the Department of Labor and Department of Education on registered teacher apprenticeships, and the Department of Labor maintains a very extensive library of resources that are of use to states, local districts, educator preparation programs, even individuals who might be seeking to go through an apprenticeship program. So I do want to highlight this as a very good gateway for all types of information related to apprenticeships, whether you are somebody who wants to become an apprentice and you are seeking a position in education, or you are an employer, or you are an existing educator. So as I mentioned, we want to highlight how we have leveraged these universal resources to provide targeted and intensive technical assistance to our states. We are very much still in the initial and exploratory phases of providing TA supports around apprenticeships. So it is a very exciting time to be out there in the field providing support around this. What we are trying to do now is leverage some of these universal resources into providing targeted technical assistance supports. So we have a group of CEEDAR states that has self-identified as being interested in moving apprenticeships forward. Those are Colorado, Georgia, Maine, Minnesota, Mississippi, Vermont, and Virginia. All of these states are at various levels of implementation. Some are at the very beginning of exploring partnerships related to apprenticeships, trying to figure out the role of their state Department of Education in supporting apprenticeships, very much still at that initial and exploratory phase around partnerships. Others are assessing readiness or going toward their educator preparation faculty, the experts on preparation, to gain their engagement and buy-in, because we certainly need their knowledge to be able to design these flexible and high quality and accessible pathways related to apprenticeships. We're working with these states to prioritize and target their needs. And of course, as I previously mentioned, most of these states are interested in exploring blended and braided funding opportunities. So we are in the initial phases of gathering these states together, doing need sensing. Our eventual vision is that we will have a cross-state community of practice around teacher registered apprenticeships that comes together and meets and informs one another. And then these states are able to take that learning with their peers back to their individual state context and implement registered apprenticeships in ways that make sense for them. So this is very exciting and emerging work around apprenticeships, and we would be delighted to continue to keep OSEP up to date on what the CEEDAR Center is doing related to apprenticeships as one strategy to address educator shortages. The other thing that I would like to do today is do a state highlight. And today I'm going to highlight Mississippi, which has been one of our CEEDAR Center partners since the first iteration of funding for CEEDAR. So they have been with us for some time. And again, my purpose is to highlight how we have leveraged CEEDAR universal resources to provide intensive supports to states. So about 5 years ago, we developed at the center in partnership with the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders and the Learning Policy Institute, an educator shortages in special education toolkit. This toolkit is free. It is publicly available on our website. And this deck that I am sharing today has links out to all of these various resources that I am sharing. It is a comprehensive toolkit that consists of a facilitation guide, that outlines the process that a state would use in conjunction with its educator preparation partners and local district partners to go through the process of assessing data around shortages, identifying root causes of why shortages exist, selecting strategies that address those root causes, and coming up with a plan to implement, carry out, and continuously improve those shortage strategies. The facilitation guide is intended as the entry point into this toolkit and outlines a process for any entities or group of entities that are interested in tackling this at a systemic level. We also have a special education teacher shortages primer that is intended to provide some basic resources about the shortage, highlight some recent research, some basics around the nature of the teacher shortage. This is sort of a library of some basic resources we have around shortages. And really the meat of this tool are the two pieces on the bottom. We have an analyzing special education teacher shortages data tool for practitioners. I'll show an example through Mississippi of how their team worked together to use this tool, but this is a tool intended for states and districts to be able to plug their data in and start being able to drill down into the nature of shortages in their state. Where are they existing? Geographically, at what point in the teacher career continuum are these shortages becoming more of a problem, and really starting to take what can be sometimes an overwhelming amount of data and providing a process and a structure to analyze that in order to start making some actionable decisions around shortages. The last piece of the toolkit that I will highlight is our shortage strategy selection tool. This is by far the most popular and used section of our toolkit. Once states or districts have gone through this process of analyzing their data, examining root causes, and really getting down to the why of the idea of teacher shortages, why do these shortages exist, then we have a way to facilitate states through the process of selecting strategies that match their needs. So this shortage strategy selection tool is organized around the framework of attract, prepare, retain. We have sub-strategies under attracting, preparing, retaining, things like grow your own or strengthening compensation or strengthening mentoring induction. Many of the topics and subtopics that align very nicely with the raising the bar areas that were shared with us earlier. We have ways to help states select those strategies and then provide them with implementation support. So if you are interested in learning more about strategies to address shortages, seeing what the research is, seeing what state examples are out there, seeing what the latest tools and guidance, that are available, this shortage strategy selection tool is really a one-stop shop for that. So in my last few minutes, I'm going to highlight how Mississippi, one of our CEEDAR states, used this shortage toolkit and the process that's associated with it to really take a deep dive into the special education teacher shortages that existed in their state and start making some actionable decisions around this. This is actually an infographic that the Mississippi CEEDAR team put together to summarize the process that they went through. They began by engaging partners. We already had a strong network for that through the technical assistance that the CEEDAR Center provides. They leveraged that CEEDAR team to then start diving into state and local data to identify their areas of need. Once they had done that, they brainstormed strategies and used our strategy selection tool to do some research into those areas. Once they had brainstormed strategies, they went through a process to prioritize those strategies. So essentially to say, we believe that these strategies will be the highest leverage strategies to address shortages in our state, and they eventually selected induction and mentoring. But I'm going to provide a very high-level overview of how they got there. So Mississippi began by examining their state level data. They took a look at student level and student achievement data. They took a look at educator preparation program data. There are 11 preparation programs that were operating in Mississippi as of that time. They looked at enrollment numbers, the numbers of people who were completing special education teacher preparation programs, and ultimately who was graduating and going out into the field to teach, and furthermore, comparing that data with the vacancies that were reported at the state level in special education teaching positions. And I think it will come as a shock to no one that they saw a great mismatch there, not providing enough teachers to fill those vacancies, and furthermore, also seeing that teachers were leaving the field. From that state level perspective, what the shortage toolkit did was give them a structure for going from high level data at the state level to taking a look at local patterns and shortages. And this is a very important part of our technical assistance process, because we know that sometimes when we look at shortage data in the aggregate at the state level, it can mask patterns that are happening at the local level. And sometimes those patterns tell us things about equitable access of students with disabilities, particularly students with disabilities from racially and culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And looking at that local data is essential to getting at this idea of why we have shortages occurring in the way they are. So this is sort of an example of how the Mississippi team used the data tool from the shortage toolkit to look at local data. So this is sort of one example of data from one district. They looked at many over the years, where they were talking about how the funnel of teachers seems to narrow from the number of applicants for open positions to those who interviewed, to those who were offered, to those who accepted positions. And what they found was actually a pretty interesting pattern. They found that when they started drilling down into local data for these particular districts, it seemed like there were enough applicants for open positions, which sometimes can seem to be a bit of a mismatch between what we know anecdotally about shortages. I think the narrative that we hear anecdotally a lot of the times is we're not attracting enough teachers to supply the demand, essentially. And when Mississippi really started drilling down into their data, they realized that what was happening is that they were attracting enough applicants for open positions, but the shortage was happening because they weren't retaining these teachers. So in other words, when Mississippi drilled down into their data, they realized that they were attracting teachers fairly effectively, but they were not retaining them. And because of that retention issue, they were seeing educator shortages in various contexts across the states. So at this point, the shortage toolkit helps to facilitate a process of diving into those root causes. So there was an issue identified with retention. What are we going to do to figure out the root causes behind why we are not retaining teachers? So in Mississippi, they particularly took a look then at some exit survey data, some qualitative data around what would have encouraged teachers to stay in these particular districts. I don't think the results of this particular survey in this particular district would surprise anyone. It was themes that came to the surface, like clear roles and responsibilities for special education teachers, having more paperwork and not enough time to do it. Things like financial incentives were also mentioned as, reasons why teachers did not feel encouraged to stay. And with this information, the team started to be able to sort of theorize about some strategies that might be able to help address the shortage. They also did the same thing with principals and their similar exit surveys about why their special education teachers left. So further drilling down into the data from that school level perspective around what do principals perceive that their special education teachers need. And again, I think that it starts pointing toward some in-service supports for this group. So once the Mississippi team realized that the issue was with retention and really started drilling down into qualitative data from principals and teachers, the team decided to prioritize one particular strategy, and that was induction and mentoring. So once the team identified that they wanted to put their efforts behind mentoring and induction, the team worked together to develop mentor training and professional development, new teacher professional development, district administrator professional development, that very important leadership perspective, and worked really hard as a state team to ensure that there were through lines across all of these various supports related to mentoring and induction. Those efforts, I will further add very much highly prioritized instruction. So things like the CEEDAR high leverage practices were integrated within those mentoring and induction supports. And with the support of the CEEDAR technical assistance providers, created a plan to implement those mentoring and induction supports and furthermore sustain and scale them. So on this slide, it talks about some of the sustainability and scale up considerations that the team thought about as they were thinking about how to take this strategy and make sure that it is sustainable in the long term for the state. So they talked about using IDEA Part B 611 funds. They invested in hiring a new special education teacher mentor coordinator at their Department of Education. They recognized that they wanted to sort of incentivize districts to support this mentoring and induction program. So they issued an RFA to fund new districts, to provide daily stipends for teachers for attending PD, travel reimbursement for those who are going around to mentoring at different schools, paying for continuing education units, and providing each mentor with a stipend per semester per mentee. So these were sort of some of the ways that the team tried to ensure the sustainability and scale up of their efforts. And this remains an ongoing area of technical assistance supports for us. Mississippi is just one of the states that is using our shortage toolkit and the associated process to address attracting and preparing and retaining an effective special education teacher workforce. There are many others in various stages of this work. We are very grateful for the opportunity to have highlighted one strategy and one state today, and would be very happy to highlight other CEEDAR Center efforts in the future related to addressing educator shortages. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A pod, and I will address those as soon as I am able. Thank you for allowing the CEEDAR Center to present today. We appreciate it. And last but not least, there is a slide that has links to our website. And with that, I believe I am handing it back over to Brian.
Thank you, Lindsey. So we're just about at time, but I want to make sure that I reiterate, if there are any questions that you might have, please put them in the Q&A and for any panelist, and we'll make sure we get back to you with an answer or some sort of support. Thanks so much for today. And before I give it off to Greg, have a great night. Greg?
Yeah, I want to thank Maureen, Lindsey, Danielle, and especially you, Brian, for pulling this together. Very informative webinar, and I hope you all appreciated it as much as I did. We will be getting information out about our March TA call shortly, so stay tuned for that. Everybody have a nice evening.